why after that trip out to the Des Moines Waterworks this afternoon, you really gain an appreciation for the huge, tremendous job that the employees there at that plant have ahead of them, because they are cleaning off the filth-covered pipes and the mud-covered place. You know, the waterworks, it's a sparkling clean place. Obviously, they have to be. That's their job. But this place, it would make a clean freak go crazy, I think, because it was just unbelievably filthy. There were some parts that weren't badly damaged, but there was one place in particular, a filter room, it was just appalling. It was.
Tuesday afternoon, July 13th, also brought Des Moines another ray of hope from the government. President Clinton announced he'd be cutting his Hawaiian vacation shore to tour the floods affecting central Iowa. Part of his stop would include WHO Radio.
I have an announcement to make. There'll be someone else joining our talk show team tomorrow. President Bill Clinton will be doing a talk show from WHO Radio at 1:30 tomorrow afternoon.
1:30, huh?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Let's make a note here.
We have final confirmation from the White House. He will be here tomorrow. He'll be touring some flood sites around the state.
He's calling you now, Bob.
As a matter of fact, yeah, we may have a call back on that. Of course, things can change, and they may be changing as we speak. But right now, we have heard from the White House, and the President will be in town tomorrow, and he will be in the studios of WHO, and he'll be talking to Jan Michelson between 1:30 and 2 o'clock.
For those of you who don't normally listen to Jan's show, he tends to lean to the right and has been, well, might be a challenge.
Lean to the left, stand up center, and fight.
Well,
shall we start
under these circumstances,
now?
I'm sure he'll treat the president with
well, I have been invited in the studio also.
While others are rocking the residents, we're talking to presidents on Des Moines News Station, 1040 WHO Radio.
Mr. President, that's a little shameless self-promotion on our part. I hope you don't mind.
I liked it. It was funny.
Mr. President, 1040 WHO Radio, KLYF FM, and TV 13 welcomes you to Iowa and the nation's heartland. Thank you for coming. You spent the morning and the midday touring the wreckage and the damage of the flood damage. Give us some of your impressions, sir.
I did have the opportunity to tour, first of all, by helicopter. I spent about a half an hour flying over the Des Moines area, and then I stopped in a supermarket lot where water was being distributed. I talked to people who had lost everything in their houses, who've lost their businesses, people who obviously have had their farms flooded out. It was a very moving thing. I talked to parents who were worried about their children and, whether they could get adequate water and how they were going to do that safely. And some of them had been able to send their children to relatives in other communities. Some had not. But the spirit of the people seemed pretty undaunted. There several people broke down and they were very choked up, but they were resolute. And I think that as terrible as these things are, in some ways they bring out the best in people. I saw an enormous number of people who had just stopped their lives and come in to, volunteer and help other people deal with their problems. I will say this, this is a different sort of emergency than I saw 10 days ago when I came to Iowa and Illinois. It's gone beyond the flooding of farmland, obviously, to the destruction of a lot of homes and businesses and the public safety issue here with the water. Your people, I think, have done a very good job working with the federal agencies and the state people, and I was very impressed by that. I guess we ought to just do a rundown since we have people listening to us from other states. We know now that there have been 5 states declared the disaster areas: Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. We also have federal officials in South Dakota, Kansas, and Nebraska reviewing the damage there. A lot of people here are clearly and justifiably concerned about these losses, and I want to make just 2 or 3 comments about that. First of all, just before I came on this program, I talked to the director of our Office of Management and Budget, Leon Panetta, and authorized him to send today to the Congress a bill to provide emergency help to the families, the farmers, the businesses, and the communities who've been hurt by the rains and the flooding along the Mississippi River and its tributaries. The bill will initially ask for about $2.5 billion in disaster funds, based on preliminary estimates of damages and several $100 million in what are called contingent appropriations. That is, if the damages come through, the money can be released. If not, then it's not released and doesn't go against the spending. We expect that the damages, frankly, will be greater than that. The compensable damages will be greater than that. And in the next 4 or 5 days, we expect to be modifying that bill some. But we felt it was very important to go ahead and get the bill in, start it through the congressional process. Then over the next 4 or 5 days, we'll be getting more hard estimates of damages in, and it can be modified first in the House and then in the Senate. After that, if further modifications are needed, we will be able to go back and ask the Congress to do more. The principle, the operative principle here ought to be that the people who've been hit by this disaster should not be treated any differently than people who were victims of Hurricane Andrew, Hurricane Hugo, the terrible devastation on the island of Kauai and in the state of Hawaii. We ought to treat everybody the same. Let me just make one other point. In addition to the aid, I want to compliment the work that has been done at the local level and by the federal agencies here. The Secretary of Agriculture, Mike Espy, has been here 3 times. The Director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, James Lee Witt, has been here extensively. He was just complimented at the Hy-Vee parking lot here because the hospital needed some water purification equipment, and he produced it within 24 hours. You've got the Departments of Transportation and Commerce and Housing and Urban Development, Health and Human Services, the Small Business Administration, the Corps of Engineers, the Coast Guard, and National Guardsmen from all over working hard here. So I have been very impressed with that, and we're going to keep doing that. I want to say a special word of commendation to FEMA and to the Director, James Lee Witt, because they have really worked hard to cut through the red tape. I got asked a lot of questions in the crowd today at the parking lot, and there must be people all over this Mississippi River area asking those questions. So let me say that you can go to a disaster assistance center set up by FEMA, and they'll give you one-stop stopping or one-stop shopping. That is, if you have some problem that's not necessarily covered by the Federal Emergency Management Act, if you just show up there, they will tell you, they'll work you through the system and what's there. We're going to have, I think, a coordinated and effective as well as a compassionate effort. So those are the 2 things I wanted to say. For the people here who still have questions about where they are and what they need, go to the Disaster Assistance Center. Secondly, I'm going to send the bill up to the Congress this afternoon and urge them to move in a speedy way. I think when I say $2.5 billion, let me emphasize there's probably another $1 billion in ongoing appropriations of the Congress, which can be used to deal with the agricultural and other losses here. Just money that's already out there that we'll just reprogram for the hard-hit areas. And as we get more disaster estimates in over the next couple of days, if it's warranted, and I think it will be based on what I've seen and heard, we will modify the figures upward. But I want to say, again, I've been very impressed that this has been a particularly moving experience for me and for the Vice President and for our families, because so many of these towns that were hit were on the bus tour that we took last year. And when I've looked at these towns and I've seen what's happened, so many of them, we were particularly along the river. We were in East St. Louis and Hannibal and Wayland and Keokuk and Fort Madison, Burlington in this state, Muscatine, Davenport, Bettendorf. We visited all those places. We visited Prairie du Chien and La Crosse in Wisconsin. So I've met a lot of the people that have been hurt by this flood, and I just want you to know that we're going to do everything we can to be there and be a good partner. And if there are more things that should be done, I want the people to let us know through FEMA.
I had a chance to speak with one of Iowa's congressional delegation last night, Senator Grassley, who was most appreciative that this has been a bipartisan effort, and he wanted to have me make certain to pass on to you how much he appreciated being included today, as well as the Republicans from the Republican side of the aisle. The second thing is...
It rains on all of us, you know.
On the just and the unjust, I think the good book says.
That's right.
Is it possible for the federal government to restore everything 100%?
Well, I don't think so. It's not possible to restore everything 100%, but there may be some, because some of these programs are loan programs. But there are a lot of things that can be done, I believe, with the flexibility that the Secretary has asked for that will keep these people farming. And that's our goal now, is to try to help put people's lives back together and keep the farmers farming, and I think we'll do that.
We want to include our listeners in this mix, Mr. President, and we've asked our listeners to call us from all over the state with questions flood-related. But I'd like to just use the privilege I have as a talk show host to ask you a personal question of my own, if you don't mind.
Okay.
What gives you your greatest pleasure as a president, flying around in Air Force One or being able to preempt Rush Limbaugh, as we're doing right now?
Oh, the latter. That's not even close.
I figured it wouldn't. Let's talk to some of the...
Actually, my greatest pleasure is being president is when you do something that you think affects people's lives in a positive way. There's so much in
Would you
public
include
life
Category B in that category?
Well, I mean, perhaps only because of the purpose for which I'm here today.
Okay. Let's talk with some of the folks who are joining us here from all over the state of Iowa. You're listening to 1040 WHO Radio, KLYF-FM, and TV 13. We're talking with the President of the United States here this afternoon, and he is here in town to assess, survey, and make recommendations concerning the flood damage we have all endured, not only here in the Des Moines area, but along the Mississippi River in eastern Iowa, in northern Missouri along the Mississippi there, and the crop damage that's been done in Minnesota. Every county in the state of Iowa is on your list now, eligible for disaster relief. I can't remember that ever occurring in Midwestern history. What about you, sir? I mean, this is just grand devastating.
We've never had a time, for example, in my state, which has more tornadoes per capita than any state, and where we've had a lot of flooding. We've never had all our counties on disaster relief, and this is highly unusual.
This is Joe. Joe, you're speaking with President Clinton.
Hi, Mr. President. I want to thank you first for taking the time to speak with me. And secondly, I'd like to find out what are the possibilities of having a large number of federal troops come in to help with sandbagging and water relief efforts?
Well, if we need them, we could provide some, certainly. But so far, it's my understanding that the National Guard and the other human resources are sufficient for that at this time. If we need more, we can provide more. And we've made it clear, the FEMA director, James Lee Witt, knows that basically that's a high priority, and if they need more bodies, more help, that we'll try to provide it.
Thank you, Joe. This is Mitzi.
Yes, hello, President. I'm originally from Lake Washita, Lake Hamilton area. All my life, we never had floods such as this. Can the Corps of Engineers not have some sort of program to where they can foresee this and, change the regulations as to water levels? It's very scary when your whole office building is completely underwater and you're having to relocate, your business.
Mitzi, let me just say for the benefit of the listeners, Lake Washita and Lake Hamilton are two of the three lakes around Hot Springs where I grew up. So okay. She and I are from the same place, more or less. The answer to your question is yes, some more can be done for some of these communities, but a lot of this flooding occurred in the 100-year floodplain, that is, in areas that are projected to flood only once every 100 years. And the governor told me today that some of this water was 4 feet above the 100-year level. Mm-hmm. It is often very difficult and quite expensive to protect beyond the 100-year floodplain. But I do believe what should happen is that as we get the water down and we manage that process, all the communities affected need to look at what their flood protection is and to analyze whether more needs to be done. There clearly are some communities that had virtually no protection at all and that were vulnerable well below the 100-year flood level. And I think that just needs to be a community-by-community assessment, and we, of course, will work with all of them. So my short answer to you is yes, I think the Corps can help some of the communities, but I do not believe that any reasonable effort would have forestalled all of the damage here. This was an unusual flood, it'll be more than a century in all probability before anything remotely like this occurs again.
Roger, you're on the WHO. Well, I think we lost Roger there. I think we may have answered his call.
You want to know how long?
No, there you go, Roger.
Yes, thank you. I'm watching the TV as I call. Thank you, Mr. President, so much for coming to Des Moines in central Iowa. I'd like to make a brief statement, then I have a couple of questions. As far as talk show hosts pontificating about what they think is right, Rush Limbaugh and others, and those of us, you, who have to lead and govern, I don't think there's any comparison. My question is this. Two questions. How long do you think it will be before the Congress of the United States acts to begin the process of getting this money through the pipeline and to the people who need it most? And my second question, Mr. President, is there has been some local criticism here in the central Iowa area regarding the Army Corps of Engineers and how they've handled the floodplain up in Taylorville and releasing the water. Is that something that you think may need to be investigated? And if so, when can we expect that to happen? And God bless you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Let me answer the first question first. I think that Congress will move very quickly on this. As I said, I authorized the bill to be sent up there today to start the legislative process. We want it, frankly, to take a few days because we want to get the latest damage estimates, and a lot of work will be done. We'll know a lot more 5-6 days from now than we know today. So if that bill needs to be amended in any way, we can amend it in the process. But by starting today, we ought to be able to move it through, and I would say in just a couple of weeks, and then the money would be released virtually immediately. Also, keep in mind, some of the funds which are emergency funds, like emergency help to people who've lost everything, been wiped out of their homes, that come through the FEMA programs, there's already money associated with that. I want to emphasize that again. A lot of the money that can be used to deal with this emergency may be already appropriated, and in that sense may not in any way increase the deficit or cause any problems, but a lot of the funds will have to be done over and above that. Now, with regard to the Corps of Engineers, let me say that you're the first person who's mentioned that to me. I'll be happy to look into it. We had a horrible flood in my state and lost a couple of little towns completely. I mean, they were totally underwater and lost a lot of farmland a couple of years ago. And there were all kinds of questions about whether the Corps of Engineers back up the river had managed the dams properly. But I have
Same questions are occurring
Same
now.
questions,
Yeah.
and they're legitimate questions, and they can be looked into. But I have to tell you, again, I want to say that when water gets 4 feet higher than the 100-year floodplain, it's almost impossible to conclude that some technical decision back up the river could have made a big difference. I think it's worth looking at. I think we should look at all aspects of this. But I think that it is unlikely that made a major contribution to this problem.
You're listening to 1040 WHO Radio. The President of the United States has joined us here in the studio. He has toured much of the area by helicopter today. He's met with people and been along the rivers watching people sandbagging, and has spoken with a lot of folks in the heartland already. He's taking your calls here at 284-1040 on WHO and KLYF-FM and TV 13. This is Dave. You're speaking with the President, sir.
Hello, Mr. President.
Hello, Dave.
I just wanted to ask you, have you flown over Red Rock? And if you have, what do you think of the outtake of the water coming out of the dam down there and the counties and towns that are below there? And also, I was kind of curious about the people that are in the restaurant business, like myself, who cannot work and cannot operate because of this water problem. What can we do to get any kind of assistance from anybody?
First of all, I didn't go down that far, but I did talk to some people about it. There are a couple of problems. One is how to manage the outflow of water from the dams. The other is, to the extent we have any control over it, how to drain all this flooded farmland between here and the Mississippi River. So you've got these tributaries that caused all the flooding around Des Moines, but you've got from here to the Mississippi River, you've got a whole swath of land that is totally flooded. So it's like you've got another big lake here that's 3 miles wide at its widest point. And to whatever extent we can control that needs to be drained in a way that doesn't just throw all the water back in at once and then down on the folks downriver. So all that will have to be managed very carefully and by people who are expert in doing it. Secondly, with regard to the restaurant business, for the people who work there and the people who own it, you should check in at the disaster assistance centers and ask essentially about two things. One is, what kind of small business administration programs are there to help you, because there are some and they're pretty significant. I think you will find them pretty significant. And secondly, for the people who work for you, who may have lost everything in terms of their ability to earn any income for a significant period of time, There's some individual disaster assistance programs that might be available to help them. And at the Disaster Assistance Center, they can give you all that information.
The cliche question is like this, Mr. President. Could you please cut spending first, right after you send us the $3 billion? Talk to us about this.
Well, let me say...
How will you be able to justify this level of expenditure to people who live in New Jersey?
Because it might happen in New Jersey someday. And because, it happened in Florida and Louisiana and South Carolina with Hurricanes Andrew and Hugo. Because, you just can't stop nature from taking its course, and we can't afford to paralyze the American people on this. And let me just back up and say, I don't want to get into a political discussion on the budget today unless you wish to do so. I'll be happy to. But let me just point out to the American people who are listening to this. Over the next 5 years, if this budget passes, we will have a hard freeze on non-health care related domestic spending. That means every dollar we increase Head Start by, or we spend more on technology, or spend to help people in California, for example, to convert from defense cuts to domestic economy and opportunities, will be made up for by cuts every place else. We have cut agriculture, we have cut veterans costs, we've cut all kinds of things in this budget to actually flatten that spending. So you've got a decline in defense spending, flat domestic spending. The only increases in this whole budget for the next 5 years net are increases in Social Security and other income-related programs, and increases in health care costs, which are still going up at 9% a year, while inflation is about 3 or 4. And that's the next big challenge for our administration. But believe me, we've got $250 billion plus in cuts there now, and we ought to keep them there. But we can't not deal with this disaster or some other disaster for fear of having it go up just a little bit.
Mr. President, this is Jan with the question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, for coming. And by the way, you keep your chin up. You're doing a great job. My question, after going through a farm crisis 10 years ago in this state and many states, we're not only flooded here, we have a crop burning up in the southeast part of the United States. We needed help from private lending institutions, and that took almost 5 years in coming to fully realize the impact of what this did to devastate the middle part of the United States. Many families in business and on farms are wondering 10 years from now, will we still have that cooperation? How can we ensure private lending forbearance and full remembrance and cooperation after you're gone and after the federal money is gone? We still need that kind of commitment. Could you speak to that, please?
Well, let me make 2 points, if I might. First of all, you characterized what happened in the 80s rather well. We had a lot of drought in the 80s, but we also had, as you well know, a huge amount of farm debt out there, which had been taken out when there was inflation, rising prices, rising land prices, and high interest rates. And then when commodity prices collapsed in the 80s, a lot of farmers couldn't finance that debt, and it took about 5 years for the federal government to agree on a bipartisan basis on a farming refinancing system, which then the private lending institutions could plug into. I think that provided for forbearance, for example, and other things. I think you've got a lot of that out there now. There are also some real options that every farming state in this country has to try to help the lending institutions deal with the farmers. We won't go through all the details, but we do. The next thing I would like to say to you, however, is that we are working aggressively to try to change the regulatory environment in which small business and agriculture live and relate to the federal financial the federally insured financial institutions, the private banks, and I think that over the next year you will see a significant increase in the credit offered to businesses and to agriculture because of this changing regulatory environment.
Mr. President, we're out of time here. On behalf of KMOX Radio in St. Louis, WCCO Radio in Minneapolis, WHO Radio here in Des Moines, along with KLYF-FM and TV 13. Thank you for coming and sharing your thoughts.
Thanks, Jan.
And visiting the Heartland.
Thank you.
On 1040 WHO Radio.
In the hasty preparations before the president's arrival, his Secret Service team had their eyes open to the situation as they readied for his visit to WHO studios.
Somebody was asking me out in the hallway this morning, they said, you certainly had a long, interesting day yesterday, didn't you? And I said, well, yeah. They said, well, what was the most interesting thing that happened? And to me, the most interesting thing that happened was that the Secret Service, who was here, of course, as early as they could be, asked me if I would take them on a tour of the route that the president would be going when he came into the building, and where we would go from there, and on up the studio and all that, and right up to the time that he walked out the door. And I said I'd be happy to do that. So we did. Showed them things, and they had questions about this, and they had questions about that. And we got done with the tour, and we wound up back at the front door, and then I said, and here we are. This would be the end of it. Is there anything else I can do to help you? Anything you need to know? He said, yes. Now, if the president should need restroom facilities, where would he go? And I got this big grin on my face because he didn't know what he was getting into, but I said, follow me.
Yeah.
So we walked down the hall, and we walked into the stairwell, and I opened the door and just held it, and here are these 4 porta potties sitting there, and I said, this is it.
Yeah.
He said, this is it? I said, well, this is kind of why the guy's here.
A sense of humor helped many of us get through the crisis.
Oh, we ain't gonna flush no more, no more. We ain't gonna flush no more. No water to spare, can't wash our hair. We ain't gonna flush no more.
Oh, it's rained forever, what crazy weather. The rivers are out of their banks, but our house is dry. We don't ask why, for this we just give thanks.
Oh, we ain't gonna flush no more, no more. We ain't gonna flush no more. No water to spare, can't wash our hair. We ain't gonna flush no more. Oh, the kids all smell no water in the well. Boil it before you drink. Though the water's high, the pipes are dry, so I guess we'll all just stink.
Pew!
We ain't gonna flush no more, no more. We ain't gonna flush no more. No water to spare, can't wash our hair. We ain't gonna flush no more.
Lots of dirty clothes, but no garden hose. I was all rained out. The farmer's corn is so forlorn, but at least it's not a drought.
Oh, we ain't gonna flush no more, no more. We ain't gonna flush no more. No water to spare, can't wash our hair. We ain't gonna flush no more. Oh, we ain't gonna flush no more, no more. We ain't gonna flush no more. If it's yellow, let it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. We ain't gonna flush no more.
We should have dedicated that to L.D. McMullen or somebody at Waterworks or all the city officials who've been working very diligently and trying to get us through this situation. Ain't gonna flush no more by Tammy Lack, David, Christian, Jonathan Lack. I'm sure Van and Connie will play that again tomorrow as well. Who knows? We might even play it again here on Drive Time Des Moines this afternoon.
Efforts to restore water service were progressing. The rivers were holding steady or dropping. Flooded streets started to reopen. On Thursday, the 15th, the city asked all residences and businesses to turn off their water mains so the system could be recharged. The city was still without fire protection, so Mayor Dorian issued a proclamation that shut down all but essential services downtown, an action that raised many questions. A tired Mayor Dorian answered some of those concerns on WHO Radio's Drive Time Des Moines.
Mr. Mayor, we'd like to talk about the proclamation. We've had a lot of calls from people working downtown saying that their employers are making them work, and they've heard that, the city's being shut down. Could you clear some things up for us?
Sure. It's been a difficult time for everyone, and it was necessitated by the state of emergency that we are in. It's not only just the lack of the fire, the sprinkler system being able to suppress a fire. It's also the lack of sanitation. Now, I've had a lot of calls from folks that have said, my job, am I supposed to go to work? I don't make that determination. What the proclamation does is tell businesses that if it is not necessary, that it's not normal. It's not business as normal. Because we're not in a normal state of affairs right now. So that's what it is. There's people that need to go to work. There's businesses that need to function, but not everyone. That's where we're at. That's what the proclamation is saying. And if it's not something that is necessary for life and property and pay, like I heard Bill Roach on there saying they need to approve a insurance request for surgery. That's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And they are making provisions in some of those buildings. I believe all of them that are trying to operate on a skeleton basis, crew, that, call monitors, get the people out, and I hope that they have water to flush the toilets, with the buckets, things like that. But
we have a major problem on our hands, and we've got just tremendous amount of cooperation. But the proclamation was for those that really didn't understand where we were at it, but made it official.
Friday the 16th was the 6th day without water, but there was a sign of real progress from the waterworks. At the morning press conference, L.D. McMullen outlined a plan for restoring water service, one zone at a time. Still, he was uncertain how long it would take. In all this time without water, there were no outbreaks of disease or sickness. Hundreds of tetanus shots were given to those who'd been in contact with the floodwaters. In 6 days, there hadn't been one death related to the flooding. Then, the death of a National Guardsman shook the relief efforts. Lieutenant Colonel Robert King of the Iowa National Guard.
Well, I regret to announce a very unfortunate situation that happened this afternoon. While a group of our soldiers were erecting an antenna to support some communication links that we needed from Vets Auditorium over here to the city operations to facilitate the communications for the dispatching of the water tanker trucks, one of the soldiers who was helping erect that antenna came in contact with a high voltage line and was killed. The name is Specialist Stephen M. West. He's from Ogden. The antenna that he was helping erect fell over, came in contact with the high voltage line. Des Moines Fire Rescue came and immediately administered aid, transported him to Mercy Hospital, and I regret to notify you that he died.
The National Guard was the backbone of relief efforts. They coordinated water distribution sites, tested all water being trucked in, supplied hospitals with as much water as they needed, and loaded countless sandbags for levees at the waterworks. Their work was invaluable during the crisis. On Saturday morning, July 17th, the National Guard again dashed to the rescue at what could have been another catastrophe.
Rapid rate last night, that is going to cause some problems.
Excuse me, Gary. Let's go back now to the Emergency Operations Center. Chuck Shockley is standing.
All right, the people hastily moving into place in front of the podium right now. Here's Judy Bradshaw, Sergeant Judy Bradshaw, Des Moines Police Department. Cy Carney stepping up to the podium.
Good morning, folks. We have an imminent danger situation for part of the city of Des Moines. The area generally that is protected by levees in the southeast part of the downtown area. The area is threatened by a potential break in the levee system at Southeast 8th Street and the river. If this levee should break, there will be substantial flooding throughout the east side of downtown and south of that into the residential area north of the river. We have
What's being done now? What are the workers doing now to the levee?
We've diverted our contractors that have been working in other places. We have a lot of dirt. We have the materials. The National Guard's on the scene. They're diverting equipment from Camp Dodge. The Army Corps of Engineers has got contract equipment coming in. And together, there's a massive effort down there to hold it, and we hope that can be done.
The Guard's efforts saved the levee. A disaster had been averted thanks to their quick action. Sunday the 18th had been the target date to get water back in Des Moines taps. However, pump failures at the waterworks pushed that date back to Monday, then Tuesday. Residences and businesses were again instructed to turn off their valves and keep them off. Most complied, however the few who tried to slip by were slowing down the recovery. L.D. McMullen outlined the consequences.
We have continued to fill the system, but it has come to a very slow fill, due primarily, we feel, to people using water, even though we have asked them not to. We have had, since this morning, approximately 50 calls from the public alerting us to people that are using the water. And as a result of that, as of immediately, the Des Moines Waterworks will be adopting a philosophy that if we find a customer that is using water contrary to the guidance that we have given, we will terminate water service for that particular customer, and they will not get service back again until everybody has received service. And so they will go to like zone E or F. In the sequence.
And the water police, as they came to be called, were serious. The water police made their first two busts yesterday, and WHO Radio's Gary Barrett says an apartment building at a Des Moines company went from flowing water to high and dry.
The Pig-Up building on Ingersoll and an apartment complex in the 2700 block of High Street. These were the first two to get their water cut off after crews found them using water. Waterworks Director L.D. McMullen says there's 198 others they're investigating who could be shut off.
Filling the 800-some miles of Des Moines water mains was a long process. There were setbacks.
Of course, this afternoon, if you remember from the briefing, L.D. McMullen had said that there was good news today. The good news was that they found one of the major sources of leaks in the waterworks treatment system, and that was a major pipe at Southeast 6th Street, a pipe that had been essentially going nonstop, leaking all of the water that they had been pumping into the system back out into the ground and back into the Des Moines River. So 30 million gallons they lost, and that seems to be the major source of the problem.
Finally, the good news came late Wednesday night, the 21st. A smiling L.D. McMullen stepped to the podium at the city's Emergency Operations Center at East High.
We made it. Believe it or not, our water distribution system is completely filled. Our storage tanks are completely filled, and fire service has been restored to the city of Des Moines. Sometime, I hope this all gets documented, and we can remember that this night was one of the greatest nights that we had in the recovery of the flood of 1993.
But the water wasn't flowing from the taps quite yet. The words everyone had waited 12 days to hear came at the morning press conference July 22nd.
Well, everything all hung together all night long, and so it's a real pleasure for me this morning to be able to release Zone A. This proclamation is Supplemental Proclamation number 6. In view of the fact that the city's water system has at this time been recharged sufficiently to provide fire protection service within the city of Des Moines, Supplemental Proclamation number 1, issued by me on July the 15th, 1993, is hereby revised to provide that businesses, buildings, and premises within the city may hereafter be occupied and used for normal business operations.
By the end of the evening, residential service had been restored to all of Des Moines and its suburbs. Though not drinkable, the water was available for bathing and, most importantly to some,
1, 2, 3. The sound of music to the ears of Kiowa Weary Des Moines residents. These folks already have their first use of the new water mapped out.
Take a bath. I think I'll do up the dishes.
First thing I'm going to do is flush the toilet so I don't have to carry water. I'm tired of carrying water. My back hurts.
The top priority of most, taking a shower or bath. And since it's been 11 days since many have done that, you never realize how great the comforts of life are to your body and your nose. Jody Chapman, WHO Radio News.
The Des Moines area had survived almost 2 weeks without water from a tap. Despite what we went through, we all managed remarkably well. The Midwestern values of lending a hand and helping each other were never more evident. Neighbors who may have only said hello found each other shoulder to shoulder on the sandbag lines. 2 furniture stores pitched in to help a competitor move its inventory out of harm's way. Volunteers manned school cafeterias to provide hundreds of meals for sandbaggers. As the waters receded, volunteers from all over the state and country poured in to help with cleanup. During the 2 weeks, mud became the great equalizer, water a common bond. Lee Klein reflected on this phenomenon.
If I were preparing the Sunday sermon in a Des Moines church this Sunday, I would center it around going to the well. And there are a lot of such instances mentioned in the Old and New Testaments. The reason I would talk about the well is that here in Des Moines, we are going to the well. And the well is the free water distribution around the city. Last night I took my 4-gallon jugs up to the parking lot at Dahl's on Fleur, and I saw my neighbors there. They were filling their jugs with water. He took a picture. She is a Spanish instructor at Drake, a native of South America. And I said, what's the Spanish for water? She says, agua, was her reply. And we had a little visit there at the well. And that's the way it was 2,000 years ago in the Middle East, and that's the way it still is in underdeveloped countries, parts of the world. You go to the well each day. In addition to the water you pick up, you get the local gossip. I have learned I can pretty well successfully bathe and wash my hair, which isn't too hard. I don't have that much, in a gallon of water. Here at WHO, we have 4 portable toilets set up outside our west door. Water we get from jugs just like everybody else. Our granddaughters are staying with us this weekend while their parents attend a wedding in Louisville, Kentucky, and my 3.5-year-old granddaughter says her mother's been baking a lot of water. I have shut off the gas water heater. I have turned off the water to my house at the meter as instructed. Last night, before driving over to the University Park Holiday Inn for a New England travel show, we did the dishes. We did them the old-fashioned way. Lila washed them and I dried. Then we visited. My mood shifts from depressed to uplifted. I am depressed as I drive through lower downtown Des Moines this morning and I see all those sandbags and all that mess left by the water, all this money, all this time, all this energy, and when we get done, we're just back to zero, or not quite, depending on how you survive if you are a business. Nothing is being added, no measurable improvement, just getting back to zero, back to where we were. On the other hand, I find myself periodically emotionally choked up and elated, I think, when I hear or see what other people are doing for free for the city of Des Moines. I drove by Brody Middle School this morning, and the National Guard guys were in their fatigue uniforms. We're still there in a miserable drizzle, overseeing distribution of water from a huge bladder of safe water, and they've been there all night. And because of this effort, there are no lines, at least in my part of Des Moines. The helicopters go over our house every day, night and day. We're in a line, you see, between the airport and the waterworks. They go right over us. There's a big Chinook double rotor helicopter. It carries cargo in a sling under the body. And the first days we'd see a tractor dangling from the helicopter. Or we'd see big pumps, I suppose that's what they were, or big motors being taken out to be fixed. Everything that they need to get the waterworks going again. But the hard part is ahead, no question. This past week there's been national attention on Des Moines. Largest city ever to lose its water supply, all-time record flood crest. The president was here, Tom Brokaw wandering our halls here, Dan Rather here. We've been on NBC and CBS and CNN, all of them. But now they've gone elsewhere because news has a rhythm of its own. After mounting the first wave of public alarm and fascination, a major news story tends to slide into a trough, washing restlessly about until the next wave forms. No national crisis can hold the public's attention with unremitting intensity day after day. So that's the situation now. And the tougher time comes the cleaning up, and tougher the farmers flooded and the smaller towns flooded and financially destroyed. Some people buy it. That's the flood of '93.
Through the worst natural disaster to ever hit central Iowa, it's been WHO Radio's distinct honor to serve as one of your primary sources of information, especially in the critical early hours of the crisis. WHO Radio has also reached out to help with the recovery. Early in the crisis, we announced the formation of a fund to benefit flood victims.
WHO, KLYF, and Norwest Banks have joined forces to help in flood relief. We've initiated a flood relief fund in the amount of $250,000. All the money will go directly to the families affected. We're asking that all our listeners help increase the amount of money in that fund.
We're proud to say that with the generosity of our fellow Iowans and neighbors from around the country, that the Iowa Cares Fund grew to over $1 million. And you, by purchasing this cassette, have helped as well. I'm Jess Peterson. From all of us at WHO Radio and KLYF, thank you for making us proud to be a part of Central Iowa.
We've been tested by the ice storms, measured by the drought, and now battered by the floods of '93. We've been shaken and baked by the worst Mother Nature can dish up. Bent but not broken, we have survived both fire and floods together. Remember, this too shall pass, and we will remain. We're proud to serve the people of Des Moines, a tradition of excellence in the most trying of times. 1040 WHR Radio.